What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Face Off Sports Network. I'm your host, Anthony Servino. Follow me on X at The Real NFL Guru. Follow the show at the FF Face Off and at fffaceoff.com. We can be found at all the top social media and podcast platforms. Back with me on a Football Monday, Pete Nova at Super Nova 38. Pete, what's going on?
What is going on? I am exhausted. I had to pick up my fiance from the airport about 45 minutes away from us. And that was about 12 o'clock last night. So I did not get much sleep. I am tired, but I am ready to go. Cracked a beer open and we're here.
Now, before, today's show, a little bit NFL news discussed. Training camps will be opening soon, which means there's going to be a lot more news, notes, nuggets to dissect from a fantasy football and betting point of view. We also have some players we cannot stop drafting, which is the main point of this program. But first, Pete, you and I both had our live Scott Fishbowl drafts this weekend. You in Philly, me in New York City. What did you think of it? This was your first one. How's your team?
Yeah, my team's good. So I was drafted out of the 108 spot. I took CeeDee Lamb. Most of the elite quarterbacks went off the board, and my thinking was I thought about maybe going with Kyler, but I said to myself, do I want the 6th or 7th best quarterback, or do I want the best wide receiver in the league in fantasy, which for me is CeeDee Lamb this year? So I said, no brainer. Let me go CeeDee. And I actually got pretty lucky because surprisingly, Kyler Murray was there for me on the way back, which in every single league that was there, which was 5 total drafts, Kyler went in the first round, like the 112. So pretty happy about my team. Still drafting. We're about the 12th or 13th round, but it was a great time. First time for me, and William Stevenson was there, and we met a lot of guys that watched the show as well, and it was a good time.
Yeah, I was in New York. Hoff was there. ATL, who's a friend of the show, been on the show before. He was there. A lot of great people there. Too many to shout out. But my draft, picking from the 10 hole, I started off with CeeDee Lamb fell to me at 10. Coming back, I took Dak, and with the 3rd round reversal, and Jamar Chase falls to me.
Yeah.
I normally with Superflex like to get 2 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds. I like to lock up a running back. But with Jamar Chase sitting there, I could not pass it up. I love my team so far. I'm a little bit running back poor, which is, again, off-brand for me. But I don't hate it. This is a weird scoring system. The system the Scott Fishbowl is. We had one guy, and I hope he wins it. He attacked the kick return and punt return scoring system so much to where after he locked up a couple quarterbacks and tight ends, he literally just took every top end returner possible.
Yeah.
So, hey, you know what? Every year there are people that exploit the scoring system, and this time he did it. I'm sure last year with the implemented kickers, somebody drafted a whole bunch of kickers.
Yeah. Honestly, the thing I would say about the kick return, punt return thing is unless you're like a top guy, that's a rotated position in the NFL, like most of the season. And a lot of those
Shaheed, Turpin, Shakir.
Yeah.
I mean,
but honestly, there's still a good amount of positions that are going to be up for grabs. Like I think I saw that guy's team. I think you had sent it, and I think the Bears guy, he was like a Chargers wide receiver, something Davis. Like I don't know. Roma Dunze is their 3rd receiver. He could be the kick return or punt returner there. Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm definitely going to try to grab some return guys. Like Turpin is a guy I'm looking at. I prefer a guy like Mims just because, and Shakir.
I think you got Mims too.
Yeah, I'm sure he got Mims. Those guys at least will be involved in the offense. But then if they're involved in the offense, maybe they lose their kick return, punt return jobs. And then now you're pretty much paying a high price for a guy that isn't going to be doing what you did. And if they actually are starting as a wide receiver, they're probably not going to return that much for fantasy because they're not that good yet. So, but to hit, the fact that you got Jamar Chase in the 3rd round, I hope anybody listening to this right now doesn't think that we're playing in some. I mean, it's the scoring is weird, and a lot of weird things happen in these drafts. So, when you hear Jamar Chase 3rd round, it's kind of weird. It's definitely weird to hear.
Devonta Smith fell to the 7th.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like guys were drinking pretty heavy in your league, and maybe they just fell asleep at the wheel a little bit.
Well, ATL Mikey's a big Dolphins homer. So last year he had the 101 and took Tua.
Okay.
So this year he opened up his draft with Tyreek and Tua in rounds 1 and 2. So, like, guys are going to do what they want to do. They're going to have fun with it. This is the type of league. It's for charity. It's for fun. Of course, you want to win it. But, some people like to have fun with it. Like, Hoff took like 3 or 4 49ers so far. I have 3 or 4 Cowboys. ATL is 3 or 4 Dolphins. We're just, we're punting.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. It's all good.
So let's get into some NFL news. So the big one, I have it on loop, or are you doing that?
That's you. I didn't touch it.
So
before you start, by the way, Greg said, "Hi guys, I'm here with my mustache I grew over the weekend." I guess that's a little dig to the show from last week with all the amazing mustaches. So, anyway, get into the news, Anthony.
The big news is Jordan Addison. And I always say, like, when we have this dead zone of NFL news, no news is good news, because usually if we get news after OTAs and before training camp, it's never good. And Jordan Addison, he brings the never good news. So ESPN's Kevin Seifert, a longtime NFL reporter, saying Addison was arrested on Sunday on suspicion of driving under the influence. According to a report by the California Highway Patrol, Addison was found sleeping behind the wheel of his Rolls Royce, which he bought on a rookie deal. I don't know if I support that or not. Blocking a lane on traffic on I-105. They decided to arrest Jordan Addison and release him from custody a few hours later. The Vikings said they're aware and are currently gathering information regarding the incident. What do we think here about Jordan Addison? I was a big Addison guy last year coming out. I had him ranked as my top rookie wide receiver, off to a really nice year, really popped when Jefferson was hurt, and then everything kind of came crashing down when Kirk Cousins got hurt. But, Addison and Jefferson, to me, they might be the best 1-2 wide receiver duo in the NFL. This obviously doesn't affect Jordan Addison on the field. He's going to pick up a suspension at some point. But I don't have a lot of Jordan. I have him in Dynasty, but like redraft, best ball, I don't have a ton of Jordan Addison. I am really worried about the quarterback situation. In the same breath, I am still willing to draft Justin Jefferson, because Justin Jefferson is a top 2 to 3 wide receiver in the NFL. And, he showed us last year down the stretch when he had, I think, Mullins and a few other guys, he can still perform at a high level with whoever the hell's under center. I don't know if I feel that way about Addison, and whether it's Darnold or McCarthy. I think the funneled targets are going to go in the direction of Justin Jefferson. And when TJ Hawkinson comes back, we assume he'll be back at some point. He's going to be another safety blanket. So, I don't know where Jordan Addison fits. And then we have a possible suspension coming.
Yeah. To get it out of the way, I mean, it is kind of a shame. You'd think at this point, I understand, like, NFL guys want to drive. I love driving my own car. I like being in control. I don't like being driven around. But his teammate did just die like 5 days ago from a drunk driving incident. So it is a shame. You'd wish for more. I mean, this guy also got in trouble last year for speeding as well. Now, he did say he was taking his animal to the vet, I think, or something to that effect. But I don't know. Just wish he would just use a little bit better. Yeah, that was last year. Yeah, okay. Yeah. As a rookie. So I don't know. You just would wish that they would just use a little bit better judgment, especially given the fact that your own teammate. I don't know if I'm a guy in that locker room, and I don't know how I feel, right? I mean, your own teammate just passed away 5 days ago, and then your other teammate is not using judgment at all and potentially costing the team wins, because he could get suspended. He probably is. And then it's just a bad look. But spinning it from a fantasy aspect, it doesn't change my thought on Justin Jefferson. I've seen guys say, "Oh, it moves Justin Jefferson up a few spots in the first round for me." Justin Jefferson's going to be who he is. Jordan Addison had no factor for my rankings on Justin Jefferson and where I want to take him. I just not really worried about it in that regard. In terms of drafting Jordan Addison, I really wasn't drafting him this year anyway, just because of the quarterback situation. When Hockenson comes back, Aaron Jones can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So, yeah, I was really kind of not really in on Addison. I don't know how far his ADP would need to drop. We'll see how it goes in the next few weeks, as I'm sure there'll be some movement, and we'll cover it on our Wednesday shows. But I wasn't really high on him in the first place anyway, so it doesn't really change a ton for me.
Let's go to our next news point, and that is going to be Kyle Pitts and the Atlanta Falcons. This is an interesting one because I've been, really for the first time in on Kyle Pitts, and I was never out on him because of talent. It was always, and I say this all the time with a lot of players, I'm out on guys because of quarterback and situation, and all of that now changes for Kyle Pitts with Zach Robinson and Kirk Cousins there. So now D. Orlando Ledbetter, a longtime beat writer for the Atlanta Falcons, reports the Falcons plan to play Kyle Pitts at tight end and wide receiver. We know he has the skill set to do both. Last year he was top 6 amongst tight ends in perimeter and slot rates with a bottom 4 in I'm being dyslexic right now, lining up on the inside. So he's not an inline tight end, and we know that, and this is all per PFF. So this is good news. This is what we want from Kyle Pitts. We don't really want him blocking. We want Kyle Pitts running routes and exploiting matchups with the defense. How do you feel about this in Kyle Pitts right now? Because this makes me want to keep drafting him as I've been all offseason long, because, we're waiting for the Kyle Pitts breakout. I've said it a few times. If it doesn't happen this year, it's never going to happen. But I really think it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, I don't. Honestly, my opinion doesn't really change too much. I try not to buy in too much unless there's I have an agenda about a player, and then I'll lean into it a little bit for fun. But yeah, I mean, I kind of expected this, right? I mean, Robinson comes from the McVay system. They like, I mean, look at Tyler Higbee. Like, they like to use their tight ends. Higbee split out wide in the slot a good amount of times, if I recall. So it's not it's not extremely shocking for me. But I do like that, the talk of like using him in different ways. And I do think that's, I don't, you have to decipher between coach speak and reality, but I don't think this changes anything, because I expected them to be creative in this offense with moving Pitts around. I don't think London's going to be the guy they move around too much. He's going to be your dominant prototypical receiver, lined up on the line on the outside. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for Kyle Pitts. My rankings don't change on him. I am pretty high on him. Yeah. He's probably like my 6th tight end in my rankings. So I'm excited for Kyle Pitts. Let's fire that train up and keep it going. Because like Anthony said, I mean, he did break out year 1, but he's had some pretty bad play at the quarterback position. But keep in mind, Arthur Smith wants his tight end to be an inline blocker and an inline tight end, and that's really not Kyle Pitts' game. So I'm excited for this Falcons offense.
And let's also like to piggyback off that. His rookie year, he topped 1,000 yards receiving with Marcus Mariota.
Yeah,
that tells you a lot about what Kyle Pitts actually is as a player, not so much the past 2 years. And then looking at the Falcons depth chart, you have Pitts. There is no competition in terms of pass catching tight ends. Everybody else are inline blockers: Charlie Werner, John Fitzpatrick, Ross Dwelly. Who came over from San Francisco. They're more like Dwelly is almost like a poor man's George Kittle with his skill set. Really good, solid hands, really good blocker. Like, those guys are going to be handling the brute grunt work as a tight end. Kyle Pitts is going to be out there running routes and catching passes. One more little tidbit from Atlanta before we move on. OC Zach Robinson tells the press that the offense is continuing to tailor and tweak things to find ways to get Bijan Robinson the football. Uh, I mean, this is almost like telling the obvious. We would hope after the Arthur Smith debacle with Bijan last year that whoever came into this offense to run it was going to do things right by Bijan. There's and Zach Robinson saying, he's going to play running back, obviously, first and foremost, but it looks like they're also going to try to get him heavily involved in the passing game. What does that mean? They could potentially line him up all over the formation.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson's a talented player. Do we see him? I mean, he has all the ability in the world to be a CMC type of back where catching the football out of the backfield. I mean, I loved watching those cool videos and highlights that that the Atlanta Falcons had when they were home, where you had the camera like above Bijan and they did it like the whole slow mo and I mean that was really cool. But in general, yeah, Bijan Robinson. I do lean Breece Hall over Bijan Robinson now. Bijan's RB3 for me. We've seen Breece Hall do it. Now, Bijan was effective and he was good last year. I'm not saying he wasn't, but Breece Hall going into his third year, coming off the ACL to be so effective like he was behind a bad offensive line with no good quarterback play where teams knew what they were doing, and for him to still be effective, I do worry about Hall did get peppered with a lot of targets because of bad quarterback play, and that might be a little bit down, but the efficiency should be better because the blocking and the scheme and the offense should be better. Bijan Robinson is going to do his thing. We know that. I am excited for Bijan Robinson this year. I expect him to be split out wide. It wouldn't surprise me putting him in the slot a few times and bringing in Tyler Algier or just going empty. So I'm excited to see it with Bijan. It doesn't change too much because I feel like we kind of heard something similar to this a couple weeks ago or a month ago during OTAs. But this just solidifies and just more compounds the idea that they're going to be creative with him as well. And we're all in on this Falcons offense. I think Anthony got a little mahogany. I heard a little pound on the desk when the report came out because he's a little too excited about this Falcons offense. But overall, it should be fantasy galore for the players in this scheme.
Yeah, I think they can be a top 10 unit. Now, Bijan last year, he was amongst running backs 99th percentile percentage of team targets. He saw 16.8% of the team targets. And this was on a Falcons team that were 25th in team pass attempts per game. Zach Robinson, who comes from the Rams, they were 13th. I see more of a middle ground because we have to factor in they have Bijan Robinson. They're going to run the ball. So if we get a balanced offense from the Atlanta Falcons, I do think there's going to be enough targets for guys like, Drake London and Kyle Pitts to thrive, and even Bijan to thrive as a pass catcher, and obviously it's still thrive as a running back. So I'm not that worried about targets going down for Bijan Robinson. No. I do see a world, the McVay coaching tree, where Bijan Robinson could be used like a Todd Gurley. And I know that's, Todd Gurley was a sensational player before the injuries, but that's how he can potentially be used in a similar system.
Yeah. And coming from the Rams, look, I'm not saying Robinson's going to do everything the same way as McVay. They may have different philosophies slightly, but probably the scheme will look the same. But look at last year with the Rams with Kyren Williams, right? I mean, like his opportunity share was one of the highest in the league, right? I mean, so he didn't come off the field. So I don't know if the Falcons are going to rotate backs too much. Tyler Algier is nice though, so they might get him some burn, but I really think they're going to lean on Bijan pretty heavy, and he's going to get a high opportunity share.
Couple kind of Zach say if Cousins is we know Cousins is above average though.
Yeah. Yep. All he has to be is average, though. I think that's the point. Yeah. All he has to be is average. It's the same thing with the Garrett Wilson thing. All you need is to have average quarterback play. Guy like Drake London and Garrett Wilson, they should be better. Before we move on to the next slice of news here, I want to grab Jamie's question real quick. He said 12-team super flex. He's got Mahomes and he's being offered Jaden Daniels, T. Higgins, 2025 first and a 2025 second. Is that too low for Pat Mahomes? My initial thoughts here are if you're a contender, I'm probably still going to stick with Mahomes. I
Is he
just
getting Mahomes?
he has Mahomes. He has Mahomes. I think the only way I'm making this deal is if you have a good, stable quarterback like a Dak Prescott, and you're pairing him with Jaden Daniels. But we haven't seen what Daniels can do, and Mahomes is going to be a centerpiece and a cornerstone piece to your dynasty roster for probably the next 8 years. So we know he's going to be elite and in the top 10 to top 5 conversation in fantasy every year. Jaden Daniels, we just don't know yet. So and those picks, while Jamie says it seems like they're going to be top 5, you don't know that either. So it's not a bad offer. Don't get me wrong. But if I'm contending, I'm keeping Mahomes. If I'm rebuilding, I don't have an issue rolling the dice and giving it a shot, but I probably still lean the Mahomes side. It's not a bad offer, though.
I don't hate the offer. I hate giving up Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Kelsey is, we know we're going to get 2 more years out of Kelsey. We don't know how much longer we're going to get Andy Reid. But, even if Reid moves on, I think Mahomes will be fine. He's still Mahomes. Yeah. Worthy's probably going to be there long term, assuming he works out. Rashee Rice is still young. Pacheco's young. I think this offense is going to be fine. And again, you have at least at a minimum 5 elite years left. And I'm being generous because Mahomes only 28.
Yep.
So in a super flex, whether you're rebuilding or contending, I would need a lot more. Like T. Higgins does not move the needle for me.
Yeah. I'm right there with you, to be honest. We do have another question here from Greg. He said, I sent an offer out. I believe he's giving up London, Wicks, and a 2025 first, and he's receiving Amon-Ra St. Brown. Other team is in a rebuild and has him on the block. So the other team has St. Brown on the block. He's giving up London, Wicks, and a 2025 first. I'll let you take it, Anthony, and then I'll follow it up.
I feel like that's a lot.
Yeah.
London, Wicks, and a first. I feel like it's a lot for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just don't believe he has any higher of a ceiling than he had last year. He's not a big play, like deep receiver. And I do the show, the RotoWire show with Jim Coventry. He was actually shocked he racked up that many yards with the type of player that he is. And where he does bring some value is in the red zone. He gets a lot of red zone targets. He makes a lot of plays. I just, when you're paying that much for a receiver, like that's CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase territory, I feel like, where London, he's fringe. Like he's still a top, 12 dynasty wide receiver plus a first.
Well, so Greg said he withdrew the offer based on your reaction already. Go ahead and continue, and then I'll give my.
No, I think it's about it. I mean, I think that's too much for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Again, limited ceiling. If we look at all the other wide receivers in that first round tier, they are all like, you can make a case even for AJ Brown to finish as a top 3 wide receiver. I can't make a case for Amon-Ra to crack that, maybe that top 2 or even be the wide receiver 1. And I feel like that's the compensation you're giving up.
Yeah.
Like London, we don't know what the hell London is yet with a real quarterback in this offense.
Yeah. The only thing I would say, and I think I do agree with Anthony that it's a little much. I would probably maybe shift it and see if I could give up a 2025 second. But what I would say is, and thanks for the question, Greg. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I do think his ceiling is capped. He's not the prototypical X receiver. He's not going to line up all over the field. He can move around, but he's really moving around in that Y role where he's off ball, and he's not the prototypical X. Drake London can play in the X role. He can play in the big slot. He can move to the Y. He can play every position on the field. The pushback I would give you is Tyreek Hill. Now, he is not Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill was able to, pretty much be even in an X role, which is pretty shocking given his size. But Tyreek Hill, has feasted in the slot and on the outside and has been able to give us those kinds of seasons. St. Brown battled through a lot of injuries last year, and they didn't really add much competition. I mean, so can I see a world where St. Brown finishes in the top 3? Personally, I can. He's talented. I mean, if you watch the receivers, that Netflix series, like he was dealing with like a torn abdominal, like, and he had foot and mouth disease and like was ripping off like 100-yard games. Like his yards after catch ability is very strong. I worry about his durability, to be honest with you. That's my worry. I do think it's a little bit pricey, but the whole I will push back in that I do think there is a realm of possibility and range of outcomes where he's a top 3 wide receiver.
He was a wide receiver 3 last year in PPR, wide receiver 4 in fantasy points per game, but like he was just like really good after the catch. Like his ADOT, to my memory, his ADOT was terrible. It was 85th amongst wide receivers.
Yeah.
So, third in red zone targets, that is a little bit juicy there.
Yeah. Well, but Sam Laporta's there too. Sam Laporta's there too. So that's something you got to worry about. I mean, he ain't going away. I mean, look at what Sam Laporta was able to do, last year. I mean, when it comes to touchdowns. So he's not going away. I mean, it's 2 really solid questions. So we appreciate that. Hoff is in here on his day off. He said, Amon-Ra is a machine, but I don't make that trade. Seems like a lot of people here are in agreement. The Roll says, honestly, A.J. Brown more than Amon-Ra, but I can't put him ahead in my rankings. That he likes A.J. more, but he can't put him ahead. And Joe is in here. We appreciate that. And Joe says Anthony had a great read on Amon-Ra St. Brown, so he kind of agrees with you. And Clueless, who is in our FFWC league that we have coming in, he said Bijan. I don't know what else he meant there, but it says Amon-Ra. But thanks for jumping in. He said he was cooking a steak before, and he was excited. He said Servino in the chat, so he was very excited to see Anthony. But yeah, so let's kind of scurry on here to our next thing. Let me see.
Well, what are we doing?
Well, I wanted to move us over to the next segment, so I was looking for the Don Flamingo.
We're still on the news set. We have one more news piece to talk about. We're getting to our players.
All right.
But Mike Gesicki, and this is something I want to touch on. I think it's important because Mike Gesicki, for a lot of people, is a difficult player to gauge. If we go back to Gesicki's like career trajectory, it looked really promising early in Miami. And then Mike McDaniels came along, and he likes that George Kittle type inline tight end that can do everything, including block. And that's not what Gesicki does well. Phased out of that offense, goes to New England, really not involved there. It was a shit show in New England, as we know. And plus Hunter Henry was there. And if, another guy you can't block, what the hell did you sign him for? Now Gesicki goes to a really interesting landing spot with Cincinnati. What makes it interesting, number one, Gesicki is the most talented pass-catching tight end Joe Burrow has ever had. Number two, Tyler Boyd is gone. And everybody's trying to figure out who the next slot receiver is. Jermaine Burton. They have Andre Ioveska. I can't even say the guy's last fucking name. They have Trent Irwin. But the Athletics' Paul Dehner, who is a Bengals beat writer, is reporting that he believes Gesicki will be used in the big slot role. This is a big reason why I've been drafting Gesicki a lot. He's cheap. Like, nobody wants Mike Gesicki. People are drafting Kobe Parkinson over Mike Gesicki right now. And I think that, it's recency bias playing a role here. But I was trying to put this puzzle piece together, and it could be beat writer speak. It could be false, but this kind of goes in light. It makes a lot of sense. Why do you bring in a tight end with this skill set with Tyler Boyd gone, unless you plan on using him in that role? Going into that Mike McDaniel year, coming into Miami, I think Gesicki was either 1 or 2 in the NFL in terms of tight end lining up in the slot. In Gesicki's career early, he had, target shares of 89, 85, and 111. So we know he can handle volume if he's involved in the offense. Even tight end point per game finishes in 2020 and 15 games. Tight end 8 in fantasy points per game, 2021, tight end 14. So he has some, even if you drafted Gesicki at cost right now and you got a tight end 14 finish of fantasy points per game, you're winning. He's a finish like that compared to his current cost. He's massively smashing expectations in terms of ADP.
Yeah. Shout out Manahawkin, New Jersey. Every time I talk Mike Gesicki,
That's
from
20 minutes away from me. In fact,
yeah,
there's a
Jersey
fucking
Shore, baby.
billboard on Route 9 South of Gesicki. I think he does a billboard for the Causeway dealerships, which is a big family-owned car dealership in this area.
Yeah, I played him in high school. I didn't play him. I played his team, and then I don't know if it was he graduated the year after me, or he was hurt that year. I don't recall what it was, but yeah, shout out, Jersey Shore, Shore Conference. But yeah, I mean, to Anthony's point, Mike Gesicki had his best season in 2020 with the Dolphins, and that was when he had 365 snaps in the slot. He unfortunately, Mike McDaniels, who's a great offensive coordinator, he comes from the 49ers system, right? And they're used to having blocking tight ends. This is almost the same argument you can make with Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons, right? Except Mike Gesicki was not as talented as a prospect as Kyle Pitts. So people have kind of just given up on Mike Gesicki. Now, granted, Mike Gesicki's been in the league, it feels like, for a decent amount of time, but he's not that old. I mean, he's 28 for a tight end. That's like fine wine, baby. But I think Mike Gesicki has always had the talent. We've seen the flashes, but for some reason, and Joe Carlton comes in here and says Mike Gesicki needs to find a new agent. If you ask me, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, when he went to New England, I was kind of surprised that that's where he decided to go. I thought he was going to be a pretty big, decent offseason signing, because tight ends are hard to find, and he has really raw ability. I mean, he's very talented. He ran, I'm pretty sure his 40 time was like in the 4.5s, which is pretty fast for a tight end. He's got all the measurables.
4.54, 96th percentile.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the measurables on the size. But yeah, I mean, Mike McDaniels, look at what they do with George Kittle, right? Like, and Mike Gesicki's just not a guy that's going to block. And then he goes to the New England Patriots, where Hunter Henry's there, and he's the second fiddle at tight end, and they just barely used him. So I don't really know why he went there, to be honest with you, at all. But he goes to a new offense with the I almost said the Cleveland Bengals, Cincinnati Bengals, new start. Probably the best quarterback, if not is the best quarterback of his career. And they like to use the tight end over there. They never had a stud. Hayden Hurst had some decent games. They've had some no-name guys over there. So yeah, I mean, he's got a chance to do some damage there. And at Anthony's point, I mean, at the point in the draft that you're getting him, if you play in deeper leagues for redraft, I mean, look, I play in a lot of 14, 16-man leagues in redraft. So guys like Mike Gesicki, where sometimes people tune out because they're like, yeah, I'm never going to have him on my team. Like, there are people out there that don't just play in 12-man leagues. Like, a guy like Mike Gesicki could be a really good value for you in leagues where waivers are thin and, rosters are deep, and you need a guy like that. And so he's a good diamond in the rough. I've always believed in the talent, and yeah, I don't mind getting some ownership. I think I have about like 15% of him in underdog best ball drafts. So I'm pretty happy with that. I probably won't get too much more exposure, but he's practically free at this point.
So I don't know if we have any comments or questions, but let's go to our players we can't stop drafting, Pete. The main segment of the show, we'll give you a couple of our players that we seem to be leaving a lot of these fantasy drafts with. Pete, why don't you start with Christian Watson?
Yeah, Christian Watson is an interesting one for me. I just, when I think about this Packers offense, there's a lot of hype around Jayden Reed, and rightfully so. I mean, Jayden Reed, he can do a lot of things. He's not a one-trick pony. He can carry the football. He's almost like a smaller Deebo Samuel in some ways. I'm pretty sure for wide receivers, he had I think he was in a top 5 for 20-yard runs from the wide receiver position. So he's a solid player, but his cost is pretty expensive. Christian Watson, especially in best ball, you're getting a guy like him in that 80 to 100 range right now. And I really like the I really like the cost for him. He led the team in targets, when it comes to targets, share, red zone opportunities, touchdowns, yards, receptions, pretty much every single statistical category. And yes, Jaden Reed did break out later on in the season. But Christian Watson, I mean, when you see this guy play football, he is a special football player. The key with him is just health. That's what it's always been, but he's an alpha. Right. He is an alpha. He reminds me similar to Drake London in some ways, right? Similar body type, similar skill set. And so I'm banking on the fact that this whole offseason hamstring rehabilitation, is a real thing. They said that his one leg was like almost 20% bigger than the other one, which was leading to like a leg discrepancy or like just overcompensating on one leg, which was giving him hamstring injuries. I'm pretty sure he said that the size is pretty much like 5 to 8% now, which is a significant difference. But if I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but I'm willing to bank on the talent. And he seems like the favorite target on the field when he's healthy. And so I'll take the favorite target in an offense that we all pretty much expect to be a top 10, top 15 offense in the NFL. That's going as the second wide receiver in the offense at a round where if Christian Watson doesn't pan out, he's not torpedoing your team. He's not hurting you. You're not spending high draft capital. Last year, you're spending a lot higher draft capital than you are now. You're pretty much getting him 7th, 8th, 9th round. And I'm totally cool with that. And so, yeah, I love Christian Watson this year.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with Christian Watson. I worry about the injury. Now, there is a report out there, came out right around late May, I believe, that Christian Watson did see a specialist about his recurring lower body injuries. So that's good news when a player is taking it serious and they're trying to get this thing handled with the hamstring rehabilitation. So that is one thing that we can possibly hang our hat on when it comes to, hey, can this guy finally stay healthy? Going back like 2 years ago, Christian Watson, I remember he flashed a few games with Aaron Rodgers. Last year, we didn't really see the same player, but again, we have to factor in the injuries and last year Green Bay's receiving room overall. It was a wide receiver by committee. That's how I view Green Bay's receiver room. I think I like Jaden Reed the most because he's more versatile. But when you look at Doves, Reed, Wicks, even Bo Melton, nobody really stands out as, hey, this guy could be a one. Christian Watson does have an outside shot to be a wide receiver one in an NFL offense, in this Packers offense. It's just dependent on his health and at his cost right now. I mean, why not? Where did you get his ADP? Because I'm seeing wide receiver 40 and right around ADP of 98.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well.
Yeah,
I mean, to get the possible number one receiver in a top 10, top 15 offense, who we've seen when he's healthy, he's explosive. He can score touchdowns in the red zone. That's for sure. I mean, the cost is pretty much nothing and the talent is there. We know that. So,
yeah.
the role said he's got Reed and Watson a tier apart in Dynasty. Joe Carlton came in and said the ADP gap between Watson and Reed is definitely a bit silly. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know what it is. I mean, I think it's recency bias. I think Jaden Reed looked good, but Jaden Reed didn't look too good in the playoffs. I mean, when the games mattered, I mean, Romeo Doubs was the main target in the playoffs, and Wicks. So, yeah, definitely somebody that I'm targeting. I want to get to some comments here too. To shift gears here, the role says, have you seen this meme where a Steelers fan is calling Justin Fields ass when he was a Bear and then he goes to the Steelers and then he was like, hell yeah, Steeler Nation? Have not seen that one. If you got us on Twitter, feel free to shoot that over to us. Jamie said, I sold Christian Watson for the 205 and Superflex, and Bo Nix was on the clock. Yeah, I'm okay with that. You're getting a quarterback that has first round capital. I'm a Broncos fan, so there's bias there, but that the value will hold up. If Christian Watson, for as much as I like him, if he has a bad year this year and the health is there, his value is pretty much a 3rd, 4th round rookie pick. Maybe. Like, that's what you're going to get for him. So Bo Nix will hold value even if he doesn't have a good year this year. So I totally get that. And Joe Carlton said it's the injuries, but if you paid attention, you saw that Reed got worn down and battered when he had higher volume. Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of the same conversation we talk about with Amon-Ra St. Brown too, right? I mean, overusage, these smaller guys, sometimes it just wears on them. And so yeah. So one more thing, Clueless said, when I go to my rankings on that site, it has everyone at the same rank. I need to make rankings on their ADP. Yeah, shoot us a message on Twitter, Clueless. If you need help with that, we can definitely steer you in the right direction. But why don't we jump into our next player here, which was Anthony's, and it's Derrick Henry. So Anthony says he can't stop drafting Derrick Henry. Why don't you kind of give us a little bit of an understanding as to why?
Yeah, Derrick Henry is one of my all-in running backs this year. Love the price point, love the ADP, usually late second round. And what I love about Derrick Henry is the new landing spot in Baltimore. Now, I'm going to preface everything with this. We know Baltimore's offensive line, they are missing a few pieces. They left this offseason. So why do I like this running back going there? Well, for the first time really in his career, he has the threat of a guy like Lamar Jackson and the RPO. And that'll balance out the offensive line downgrade because the defense has to focus on Lamar Jackson and what he's going to do with the football. If we go back in time, running backs like Devonta Freeman off the street, they were pretty good with Lamar Jackson. Even, Gus Edwards, most of his career with Lamar Jackson, averaged over 5 yards a carry. So, running backs perform. I mean, how much hype did J.K. Dobbins have if he ever stayed healthy in this offense with Lamar Jackson? Now we go to Derrick Henry last season. He had his worst season into memory. Well, why was that? Well, sure. Let's factor in Derrick Henry's entering his age 30. He's 30 and a half, so he'll be 31 this year. So was it age or was it the fact that the Titans offensive line was probably the worst it's ever been in the Henry era? The offense was atrocious. There was no semblance of a passing attack whatsoever. And he was also conceding touches to Tajay Spears. All that being said, Derrick Henry was still the PPR RB8 and RB16 of fantasy points per game. So his overall fantasy finish was inside the top 10. I like points per game more. Not so good, but still, I will take it. If we go back to the previous few years, Derrick Henry would know what he brings. He's a top 5 running back of fantasy points per game. All that bad from last year, conceding touches, bad line, no passing game. He still rushed for 12 touchdowns. Back-to-back years where he had at least 12 touchdowns with the Tennessee Titans. So where do I project Derrick Henry in his new spot at his age? I can see Derrick Henry getting back to that 1,300-yard rushing mark. I certainly see Derrick Henry surpassing 12 touchdowns once again. And I get, you want to bring up the Todd Monken offense. They want to throw the ball. They did not bring Derrick Henry to this team because they want to throw it excessively. Derrick Henry's going to be very much involved in this offense. Baltimore is not like John Harbaugh is not a dummy. He knows the reason why he doesn't advance in the playoffs is because they can't run the ball well enough. And Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, they didn't get the job done when it mattered most. And I think that we're going to see a little bit of a different Monken offense, a little bit of a different Ravens offense with running the ball a lot more behind their workhorse running back. If you have 1 or 2 good years of Derrick Henry and you're chasing a Super Bowl ring, and Derrick Henry is also chasing a Super Bowl ring, I think he's going to want every opportunity to cash in and help this football team. So if there is one more elite year, if there's one more top 5 year out of Derrick Henry, I think it comes in 2024. And drafting him at a late second round ADP, if he gives us something similar to last year where he's a top 10 running back in PPR, I think that's a win.
I agree. Keaton Mitchell, 2 touchdowns last year, 47 attempts, 396, right?
Injured again. He's
injured.
They literally just put him on today, 18 minutes ago, put him on the PUP list.
Yeah, which I thought was going to happen. I am a Derrick Henry dynasty owner, and I actually made a trade to grab Justice Hill for pretty much nothing a month ago, just to protect myself with Henry because Keaton Mitchell's injury was nasty, and I just did not expect him to to start the year healthy, and I still don't. And even if he is, he's going to be a change of pace gadget guy. He's not going to be a guy that's going to touch the ball a ton. But he had 2 touchdowns last year. Justice Hill had 3, and Gus Edwards had 13. So you're talking 18, 19 touchdowns from the running back position. And, I crazy enough, like the offensive line for Tennessee, which I was actually kind of surprised about, but I'm going to give you the numbers anyway, because it doesn't really fit with my argument, but I'm going to let you know, because I was pretty shocked too. But the Tennessee Titans were like second from Pro Football Focus for their run blocking last year, which was pretty surprising to me.
Hell out of me.
It does. Yeah, it shocks me. But you know what? I think it's because we sit there and we look how banged up Tannehill got, and we say, oh, this offensive line stinks. And they did stink. Pass blocking. I guess run blocking wise, though, they were pretty solid last year. The Ravens were actually lower in run blocking. They were 8th, which is still, it wasn't a huge difference, but overall, actually, hang on 1 second. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Titans running were second in the league. They were actually 17th in run blocking. So regardless, the point is the Ravens have a better offensive line. They have more targets. They have more weapons. That threat, like Anthony said, of Lamar Jackson is going to worry teams. And yeah, I like Henry. He had 12 touchdowns last year. Gus Edwards had 13. Gus Edwards. And anybody that watched Derrick Henry last year, this dude did not lose a step. He looks good. He was very fast, still strong. So I have no concerns of him slowing down. And so, yeah, I like him at his cost. Yeah. I'm very high on him this year as well. And he's one of those running backs where, if you miss out if I miss out on Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, obviously Bijan, and CMC, like he's my 6th guy. Like I have him over Gibbs, honestly. Like I crazy enough to say, but
me too, actually.
Yeah, I have him over Gibbs. I just think Gibbs is going to be in a timeshare.
I have Gibbs behind Henry, JT, and Barkley.
Yeah, that's how my rankings are too. I am shocked that Gibbs is so high. I think people are just buying into and drinking the Kool-Aid, but David Montgomery, people they like this guy. Like he's not going anywhere. People were so frustrated last year. And I'm like, I don't know why people are so confused. They paid David Montgomery. Granted, that doesn't always mean anything, but like anybody that watched him in Chicago, he was a good running back. And for you're telling me Dan Campbell, if he had to choose one guy, his philosophy, he's going to be the guy that says, hey, he wants to bite your kneecaps off. Like, give me the guy that can pound the rock. And that's David Montgomery. And it's not a knock on Jahmyr Gibbs, but what they want to do, that's why I'm hesitant. But I like Derrick Henry. I like the cost on him. You can get him in the 3rd round, early 3rd round, mid 3rd round in some drafts. Even I've seen it go too. So I have no problem with that cost at all.
Yeah, Henry still, before we move off, 86th percentile in average yards after contact last year, 92nd percentile in percentage of his yards after contact, and 17.5 broken tackle rate, which is 77th percentile amongst running backs. So he still has it.
Yeah, he's still got it. All right, let's move on here. Just want to shout out the chat real quick. Algorithm says, what's up, guys? Thanks for jumping in. He said, Anthony, you catch any booty monsters lately? I don't know. If you've watched the show, you know what we're referring to. And last comment here from Jamie, and we'll move on. He said, also Detroit's defense has gotten a lot better, so they'll probably run the ball more with Monty instead of throwing the ball out. That is a good point as well. But all right, moving on here, we'll go to my next guy. And that's going to be Josh Downs. Josh Downs, I know there's a lot of hype when it comes to Adonai Mitchell, and rightfully so. I think he's going to be a good player for this football team. But Josh Downs, for what it's worth, I mean, he looked like Anthony Richardson's favorite target out there when he was healthy. I watched those games because most people wanted Anthony Richardson was exciting. Obviously, when he went down, I can't say that I watched a ton more of the Colts offense, and Michael Pittman seemed to get better. And Downs not as much, but Downs was in that 90 to 100 targets last year. He had 98, right? As a rookie, 98 targets is not something to be overlooked. And he only had 2 touchdowns, right? So you hope that there's positive regression there, and he gets more to that 5 touchdowns. But he had, his air yards and his receiving yards, were pretty good for a rookie. 68 receptions. He played in all 17 games. And I just don't really understand the price for him. And he's going behind Adonai Mitchell. And, I don't know. We're still kind of in that like rookie fever. And I said Adonai Mitchell's an exciting player, but it really wouldn't shock me if Josh Downs ended up being Richardson's favorite receiver over Pittman as well. Like, they just seem to have a connection early last season. They were both rookies coming in, and I do think that matters. 2 rookies coming in, quarterback, wide receiver, in building that connection. So yeah, I'm grabbing Josh Downs at his cost, and it's really not expensive. I'm trying to pull up his ADP. I thought I had it somewhere here in my notes, but I don't know, Anthony. What are your thoughts on Downs? I mean, do you have any exposure to him? Is he someone you're drafting, or are you kind of avoiding him at his cost?
Listen, I have some Josh Downs. Adonai Mitchell doesn't really worry me because I don't think they're going to be in the same role. I think Adonai Mitchell is going to be in that in that Pierce role, maybe that big play receiver. I think Downs, his role in this offense is fairly set. I just don't know because Adonai Mitchell came in with some pretty good hype. So can he be more involved in this offense? Downs draws comps to Wan'Dale Robinson with his skill set. I think he was a 3rd amongst wide receivers last year in slot snaps. So we know that's where he's going to be in this offense. His ADP right now is 132. And I'm using underdog for this one. He's free. Yeah. A guy at 132 who had 98 targets, very much reliable. And that was an offense run by Gardner Minshew most of the year. We have to assume that Anthony Richardson is going to be a superior passer at some point. He's going to be a better passer than Gardner Minshew. At worst, he makes plays with his legs. They ad lib and Josh Downs gets open. Like I'm gonna buy into Josh Downs. I just don't have a ton of them. Sure. Usually, players around his ADP, I'm drafting them more. Guys probably like Brandon Cooks, who's I think he has a little bit of a higher ceiling if this Dallas offense does what I think it's going to do. And he's obviously going into his 2nd year in this offense. Like last year, it took Cooks a little bit to get going, where, in year 2, they didn't really bring in any competition for targets. Like this could be a big year for Brandon Cooks on the other side of CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
So Downs is a better, I would call him a stability piece where if your roster build, you have a lot of high ceiling guys, and then you're in the back of this draft, like, well, what am I going to do if somebody gets hurt? What am I going to do in a bye week? And you want a guy who's going to get you like 10 PPR points, Josh Downs your guy. If you're a point in this draft, you have a lot of solid guys. Let's say you opened up with Amon-Ra St. Brown, high floor, not a lot of ceiling, and you want to take some dart throws at big ceiling receivers. This is the point of draft where you'll take them. So roster build should dictate whether you draft a guy like Josh Downs or a guy like Brandon Cooks.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm using FFPC ADP, and he happens to be even lower on this. He's going at wide receiver. He's going at current ADP as 161, which is really low. And I'll give you some guys that are just going around him. Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Algier, Antonio Gibson. Now these are running backs too, but I'm just giving you a flavor. Wicks, Darnell Mooney. I could see the case, but I think Downs.
That's why I don't have a lot of Downs, because I have all the money.
I think if I was making the bet today, Downs catches more passes, but Darnell Mooney can stretch the field, and he probably has more yards. It wouldn't shock me. Jahan Dotson, give me Mooney over Dotson. Adam Thielen, Gabe Davis, Xavier Legette, Demario Douglas, Quentin Johnston. Like, these are the guys, and we're talking about a guy that had 98 targets last year. Joe Carlton comes in here and says, Josh Palmer's in that range too. Yeah, I honestly, and I'm a big Josh Palmer fan too. So I'm getting exposure of both of those guys pretty much at that range, and a little bit of Darnell Mooney and a little bit of Jermaine Burton as well. So Jamie says he's got Downs in his top 40 when it comes to wide receivers. A little high, but honestly, wouldn't shock me if he finished in the top 40 as well. And that's probably kind of to Anthony's point. You're getting guys at this point where they're going to get the targets and you use them for a bye week. And guess what? If Michael Pittman goes down or Adonai goes down, right? Like, I mean, they don't even have a stable tight end. Mo Alley Cox. We're waiting for the Jelani Woods breakout. Is it going to happen? I don't know, right? Jonathan Taylor doesn't catch balls out of the backfield. So, there are targets to go around, right? And Richardson
the
runs the ball.
kind of mid.
It is. That's what I'm saying.
Jelani Woods. Everyone's talking about Jelani Woods. The guy hasn't done shit.
Yeah, that's
there's Mo Alley Cox.
Yeah, Mo Alley Cox will catch 5 touchdowns this year on like 15 passes.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Well, let's do one more because we're pressing up with time.
Yeah.
And my other player I can't stop drafting is Joe Burrow. And it took me a little bit, like this offseason, and I've always been like, if anybody has followed me or listened to the show, I believe Joe Burrow is the second best NFL quarterback in the league. NFL quarterback. There's Mahomes, there's a teardrop, there's Joe Burrow, and I think there's a teardrop behind Joe Burrow because Burrow can beat Mahomes. Nobody else seems to be able to beat Mahomes. But like fantasy football, and Joe Burrow has dealt with a lot of injuries, but fantasy football, he had one, I would say 2 big, 2021 quarterback 10 fantasy points per game. But the big year was 2022, where it was a QB4 in fantasy points per game, played all 17 games. That was that outstanding run. Cincinnati looked like the next big thing. And then last year, the wheels came off with Joe Burrow. Everybody was banged up on the offense. Defense took a step back. So this year's edition of Joe Burrow, like I can't, and I make this mistake. I'm human, and I think a lot of us do. We see the injuries. We see, well, what's going on with Higgins? Now, Higgins, they're not coming up with a long-term deal. Today was a deadline. He signed his tag last month. He's there for this year. Jamar Chase, he gets a little bit banged up. Higgins gets a little bit banged up. They lost Boyd. They lost Joe Mixon. So there's a lot of losses here in Cincinnati. So why buy into Joe Burrow? Joe Burrow's cost right now is sinking. I'm seeing him slip. I believe the latest FFPC ADP. I think he's going behind like Jordan Love. The more I dissect the loss of Joe Mixon, the more I like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And injury aside, if these guys can stay healthy, I think this Cincinnati offense, they're going to throw the ball a lot. Last year, and this was a year where, like I said, Higgins a little bit banged up. Jamar Chase, I believe, missed some time. Joe Burrow missed a lot of time. They still threw they were 8th in NFL team pass attempts per game. They're throwing the football in the Zach Taylor offense. And if Joe Burrow is throwing the football this year, I think they could potentially be a top 3 team in pass attempts per game. Why is that? Running back position. Mixon, he might not be the sexiest guy in the world, not the sexiest NFL running back, but he was reliable. He could do it all. He was dependable. I am not sold on Zach Moss on being anything but an outlier with a very good team at running the football with the Colts last year. He got not a great deal. He didn't get starter money. He didn't get Tony Pollard money. He got like Austin Eckler money, less than Austin Eckler money, which is backup money in the NFL. Chase Brown is nice. He's more of a PPR guy. I don't see him as an every down back. So this running back room is very much questionable to me. And if they can't sustain a running game, a team that threw the 8th most times last year, it's only natural where they could be top 3. This defense, I don't believe is going to be better. I think the defense is going to take a step back. So all signs are pointing to if the Cincinnati Bengals are going to win football games, it's going to be on Joe Burrow. And at his current cost, going right around QB10 in the FFPC, I will gamble on that because, like I said, 2 years ago, he was a QB4 in fantasy points per game. We know he has it in him when he's healthy, and I'll bank on, barring some weird freak preseason injury again, like past couple years. It was what was like the appendix. And then last year, it was the calf strain. And then it was a wrist ligament injury that took him out. Like, if we get a healthy Joe Burrow, I think he's one of the non-mobile quarterbacks that can finish inside the top 5.
Yeah, and we did a video prior to the draft and right around free agency, and I think me and Anthony, I think our mindsets
We're
shifted a little
both
bit
on,
on
yeah.
Burrow. Yeah, and
And
there's nothing
look, before you go, let's
wrong
preface
with
this.
that.
We are allowed to change our fucking minds, people. There's a difference, and this is the difference between, like, and you follow who you want, but like people who like they plant their flags and they'll draft the guy year after year to blow up in their face because they want to be right so bad. This business, and I got this from Colin Cowherd. You have to change your mind. You have to pivot. And that is something I think all of us here at Face Off, on this show, we pivot according to what the players and the news tell us to do. So it is okay to be out on Joe Burrow before the draft and be like, hey, things are starting to look like Joe Burrow could be a nice value right now. We're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think they did a lot of things that surprised me, right? I mean, we've talked about the offensive line. I mean, last year pass blocking, this was the 22nd ranked offensive line in pass blocking. They made some changes. Trent Brown is there. They have Orlando Brown year 2 in this system. Trent Brown is not the same guy that he once was, and I know Joe Carlton's in here. And he's a Pats fan, and he probably has a pretty firm opinion on Trent Brown. But he had some good years, and he's probably better than what they had last year. And they drafted Amarius Mims. This dude is a freak. I mean, 340 pounds, 6'8" tackle. Yep. I mean, the sky is the limit for Amarius Mims, and so if Joe Burrow can get more time in the pocket, I think he can definitely beat out this ADP. I mean, prior to, now a couple months ago, he was kind of at that like 6 range and it was a little expensive for me, but as ADP has shifted, right, the average his ADP for quarterbacks is similar to where it was, but people are drafting him later. And at that point, I'm okay taking a shot. To Anthony's point, like, this team will probably throw the ball 5th most in the NFL. That defense stinks. It's not a good defense. Like, they're going to be in some shootouts. They play in a really good division, right? They play with the Browns, who should be better. If Watson takes that next step, and they're a playoff team almost last year. Well, no, they were in the playoffs last year. Sorry. You have the Steelers, who are going to be fighting and scratching every single season. And you have the Ravens, who are Super Bowl contenders, right? And the Bengals, respectively, are probably contenders as well. So the loss of Mixon, I'm not a big believer in Zach Moss either. After those few blow-up weeks in the beginning of the season for the Colts, he really was not anything special. And I think he was a little inflated on his stats, on his yards per carry. And I think that's going to change in this offense. Chase Brown's more of a receiving back. He had some big splash plays, but I think Chase Brown's going to be a good safety valve, kind of similar to what Mixon was for this offense. And that kind of takes me to the Chase Brown and the Zach Moss argument. And we can talk about that at another time. But yeah, I like Joe Burrow. I mean, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a top player in this league. And he was quarterback 4, in 2022. So not last year, the year prior. Quarterback 10 the year before that, right? So, there is top 5 ability for Joe Burrow, and I think he has a chance to do it. Jermaine Burton and Mike Gesicki should help this offense. You can make the argument that Chase Brown is a better pass catcher than Joe Mixon, who Joe Mixon did catch a lot of footballs, but Chase Brown, Mike Gesicki, Jermaine Burton, T. Higgins, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, staying healthy this season on a contract year, right? Like, this offense has the means to blow up. The only caveat that I would say is they did lose. It's who's the guy that went over to the Titans?
Boyd.
No, not Tyler Boyd. Play caller.
Brian Callahan.
Yeah, Brian Callahan. So, I am a little
promoted in-house.
Yes, I know.
We should see a similar
stay the same. Yeah, we gotta hope that's the same. And Zach Taylor, I have no doubt in my mind, will step up and call plays if there tends to be some sort of issue there where they're not gelling with the play calling. They'll get it right. So that's all I have to say on Joe Burrow. Joe Carlton came in here. He said, especially like him in 6-point per pass touchdown leagues. NFFC has that in their scoring format. Super Bowl or bust for Cincy. Yeah, I mean, it's put up or shut up. I mean, they've had their way with the Chiefs in their head-to-head matchups, but if they're not going to do it now, I don't know when they do it, right? I mean, that window's not going to close, but T. Higgins is leaving, and then you got to hope that Jermaine Burton and some of these other guys step up, and they still got to pay Jamar Chase too. So I think they'll still be contenders and they'll still stick around. But yeah, they gotta get back at least to the conference game, in my opinion. But we'll see. So that's really all I got to say left on this Cincinnati offense and Joe Burrow.
But, with that, we're going to begin to wrap up. This is another outstanding show, Pete. We'll be back Wednesday, of course. Every Wednesday, we're going to be doing the Market Watch, the ADP Mover show, telling you the players you need to know about who are moving in July, average draft position. And again, as we get into camp, preseason, roles change, injuries, ADP is going to be all over the place. So these are shows you don't want to miss as we enter fantasy draft season. But until then, for Pete and myself, this is the Face Off Sports Network. If you want to win, you have to tune in. We'll see you Wednesday.